Pick Computer Science video number 35, where we look at parameters. Now, in our previous videos on procedures and functions, we've seen that procedures and functions are able to accept parameters. So parameters will be declared and defined within brackets after the name of a procedure or a function, and they'll be given a data type as well as their identifier, their name, which is in bold. This one actually belongs and it needs to be fed into a function. I can tell it's a function because it is shown as something that has a data type that is returned. It's going to return an integer. We can see that on the end here. And one other thing that we haven't talked too much about is how that parameter is accepted by the function. And that first word in the brackets, or parenthesis to give them their correct name, is going to either say by val or by ref. And that's very relevant to today's video. Anyway, here is the parameter being passed, or a value being passed into the parameter of this function, which is called I Fahrenheit. It's expecting the value of the temperature in Celsius to be passed into it, and I guess it's going to return the Fahrenheit value for that. So here we can see it being called, and it's being assigned to the value of a variable, which is called I conversion. So I conversion equals the result of the function I Fahrenheit with 3 passed in as the I Celsius parameter. We will also see parameters being passed into built-in functions, such as our built-in function MSG box to bring up a message. And one key thing that we can just note from this slide is that whether it's us declaring and defining parameters, whether it's us passing them in to functions or procedures, we'll always see parameters inside of parentheses or brackets or rounded brackets. So that's a big clue as to what we're dealing with. If it's inside brackets, good chance that it is a parameter. So what about this by value and by reference business then? Well, if we're thinking about by value or by val, an analogy might be you passing a message to a friend. If we were going to say we were going to pass a message by value, then it's almost as if a copy of that message is being sent to the friend. So if the friend was to change the message at all, the original isn't affected. You still have the original copy of the message. And that's what happens when we're passing a parameter by value. There's a copy of some data, a copy of the value is sent through to the function or procedure and used within that function or procedure. It may well be changed within that function or procedure, but the original value back in the parent program is never affected. What about by reference then? Well, the analogy of this is where there is no copy of the message made. You are giving the original message to the friend. If the friend is to change anything to do with that message or anything to do with a value, then if you need that back again, then you haven't got your original anymore, you've only got the changed version. So let's have a look at it and see how that works in code. So what I've got here is a VB.NET console application that has 3 subroutines in it. This first one is my parent program, and in there I'm declaring a variable, an integer variable, and setting it as 7. I'm going to pass that value into another subroutine, another procedure, which is called change number by val. Now it doesn't need to be called change number by val. It could be called change number first time or pigeon or anything, and that's going to call up this procedure. What is important is not really the identifier, but the fact that the parameter that's being passed in is expected by val, by value. So the parameter is called iNumber. It's accepting iMyNumber, and what it's going to do to that is add 1 to it once it gets inside this subroutine. it's going to display the new value. So if we're adding in 1 to 7, which has been passed in, it should display 8. It's pausing. It's returning control back to the main program. Now what the main program at that point is going to do is show what my number within this parent program is actually equal to. Now because this was passed in by value to this subroutine, the original should not be affected. So this line should display 7, and then we pause. What happens after that is I call another subroutine, a third and final subroutine, which is called change number by ref, and guess what? Yes, it's going to accept the number by ref. Now the remainder of the code is all the same as the code up here. It's going to increment the value received by the parameter by 1. It's going to display 8. But what will be interesting is to see what happens when controllers return back to the parent program on this line here, and to see what number is displayed there. And we might expect it not to be 7 this time, because remember, we've updated the value of the parameter by reference, so it's actually also going to update the value that where it was passed in. So we might expect this to actually show 8 instead. So let's give it a whirl. Let's put the breakpoint on just about here, so we should be able to see everything that happens. So I run it, and the breakpoint's hit here, so I'm going to press F8 on the keyboard to step through, see what happens. So my number is 7. We're passing 7 into change number by val. So if I hit F8 again, it steps down onto this line. Yeah, and 7's been passed in. Now we're going to increment that number up to 8. We're going to display it. There it is. And it's expecting us to hit enter at this point, of course, because we're on a read line. So we do that, and it returns us to our code, and we've finished that change number by val subroutine. So then it goes back to the main program, and it should display 7 again. My number is still 7. And it is. Hit enter again, back to the code, and this time we're passing that same value, my number 7, into a similar subroutine, but one where the parameter is expected by reference and not by value. So F8 again, there we go, we jump down to the correct subroutine. It's passed in as 7. We're incrementing it to 8. We should be displaying, 8 now. Let's see. Yeah, it's done that nicely. This time when I hit enter, we come to the end of that subroutine, back to the parent program, and my number has changed to 8 now. So if we F8 onto the next line, we are going to be displaying 8 this time. So we can see the first time we ran through a subroutine there, and it's expecting it by value. The original value was not changed. Second time when we did it by reference, the original value was changed. So now we've seen the example, what are the key things we need to know? Well, to define parameter, we would say data structures passed into a procedure or function when those procedures or functions are initially called. We can define parameter passing as the process of providing a procedure, function or module with the values at the point when you call it. We need to know a lot more about by val and by ref. We need to know some definitions here. So by value is if a data item is passed by value, a local copy of the data is used which is discarded when the subprogram exits. And alternatively, by reference is if a data item is passed by reference, the location in memory of the data is used. This means that any changes are retained after the procedure or function has been completed. This is taken from the pseudocode guide from the exam board. So unless stated, values passed to subroutines can be assumed to be passed by value, and that's the default for VB.NET as well. If this is relevant to the question, ByVal and ByRef will be used. In the case below, X is passed by value and Y is passed by reference, and that should be pretty straightforward for people to see there. If we just have one final look at the code that we looked at before, and if you weren't sure about anything with that, you should pause this really and have a good look at it now. I mentioned before that you should always be looking for parentheses when we're talking about parameters. So say you were given some code and asked to identify some parameters, then we might be looking inside brackets on the top lines of subroutines, and we can see that the parameter expected by change number by val is inside the parenthesis. It's called iNumber, and likewise for the parameter of change number by ref. We could also sort of see the values we're passing into parameters. So if we're on a line of code and not the top line, then if there are parentheses, then there are values being passed in to the called functions and procedures. So we could say that when we're calling change number by val, we're passing into its parameter, whatever it may be called, the value that's in the variable iMyNumber. There are, of course, functions and procedures that don't have parameters, such as our main function, our main procedure here, which is called main and is our sort of parent program. It's just got some parentheses there which quickly open and close and don't have anything in them. But these are a good sign of procedures and functions. If we see any brackets, then we're likely to be looking at the calling of or the sort of declaring of a function or a procedure. Even console.writeLine and console.readLine are functions. We can see that because they've got brackets after them. So as well as being able to find out about parentheses in code by looking inside brackets, wherever we see brackets, we know that we're either defining or calling a function or procedure. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.